5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Project Egg Show. Today, we have the honor of speaking with Marisa Allen. Now, Marisa is a seasoned franchise and business executive entrepreneur with over 25 years of business experience in a variety of roles in different global business and franchise concepts. Marisa has an extensive background in management, sales, marketing, business development, and virtually every aspect of operations. And it's that experience that makes her uniquely qualified to talk today and be an expert on franchising and business and whatnot. In addition, Marisa has done so many other incredible things that I could not possibly get to in this very brief introduction. So I'm going to stop talking now and welcome Marisa. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me. I'm doing wonderful. Wonderful.
It is so good to have you on the show today, and it's such an honor to be speaking with you. So let's jump right in.
Sure.
What is your story?
What is my story? I would say I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and that story really comes from my, very humble sort of upbringing with my parents. My father, I'm first generation Canadian. My father was the typical immigrant that came over in the 50s with nothing. And I mean, literally nothing. And, with very little education, enabled himself to come to a country where he saw, the land of opportunity and be able to create businesses for himself. He got involved in the automotive sector. And I think that's where sort of my story began. And has evolved, and I think it continues to evolve because I don't think the story has ended just quite yet.
So that's where it began, but what happened after that? I want to hear the whole story.
So, went to school, and that was really big on, my parents because they, didn't have the luxury of education. So they really instilled the importance of getting the proper discipline and the learnings. And so I went to business school and sort of learned the soft skills, if you will. And after graduation, I had an opportunity to get involved in a franchise. And, didn't know much about it. And I was managing some stores, and they were like, you should just get a franchise. I was like, okay. So I went to my dad, and he was unsure and didn't know what this was all about. So instead of giving me the money, which he could have at that point, he said, I want you to understand, what it means to work hard to earn a living, and when you're taking on debt and whatnot. So he guaranteed the loan, and I had to pay it back within 12 months, which I did. And so, good life lessons for me. And I think that also made him very proud because I was able to demonstrate that this wasn't just something I just was like, I want to do, and, I want it. And, so there were a lot of life lessons throughout that. And that's where I really cut my teeth in franchising, understanding what it was about what it's like to be a franchise owner, and, sort of those parts of the business model. And I really enjoyed it. I felt it's, created the foundation for me, and that I utilized sort of springboard into other franchise opportunities, and as well my corporate career on the franchisor side. So that's kind of was sort of the early part of the story.
So you went from business school to managing a bunch of stores or a bunch of franchise locations to then opening your own franchise. Those are some pretty big steps. I want to drill down into how did you go from just getting out of business school to managing a bunch of locations? Like, what happened in between then?
I personally, I don't see them as big jumps. Maybe from the outsider looking in, I just saw it almost as a natural transition. for me. So I guess I'm not seeing it that way. And things just kind of evolve from one into the other, into the other. So I personally, I didn't see them as huge leaps, but maybe someone, like you said, looking in from the outside is saying, wow, like that's, a big leap. So, and I think that's where maybe my philosophy is about, thinking about what you're doing, yes, before making a decision, but knowing that there's risks involved with making those decisions, but belief in yourself and belief in what you're going to be involved in, I think that makes it an easier transition and an easier way to come to those conclusions.
Where did your belief come from?
From inside, and always believing in myself and being told, as part of the upbringing that, you can do whatever you put your mind to, and never doubting that. And sometimes maybe straying the course. Most of my friends went on to, it was sort of like, okay, you went from school, you went to this corporate job, and you did, X, Y, and Z. And I was always kind of the one that wanted to stray off the beaten path. And, and I remember my friends going, oh my God, like you're going to open up your own business. And I was like, yeah, why wouldn't I? And, I made sacrifices, and, they worked their 9-to-5 jobs where I was working nights and weekends, sometimes 7 days a week. But to me, it was well worth the effort. So.
Can you talk a little bit more about what those sacrifices actually were? Because I feel like a lot of people looking in, they may see, oh, Marisa's super successful and launched her own business and it was great and managing all these, but what were those sacrifices? Like, I want to know the real story.
Yeah. Well, I always tell people, don't look at what, the 20-year success. You got to look at what has built up to that, right? In anything we do, people often look at an individual and say, oh my God, like I wish I was like them. And they don't see or fail to realize all of the hard steps that it took to get there. So for me, the sacrifices were, losing some friends because they didn't want to put up with my schedule. The sacrifices that I did for myself financially, because, when I was working hard to pay off loans and not making a lot of money, where friends were traveling, I wasn't. And, so those were sort of some of the personal sacrifices that at that point in my life that I decided to make. Now, I was younger, I was still living at home, so it made it a little bit easier. But for me, perception is your own reality. They were huge sacrifices because, you look at your surroundings and what the masses are doing and you're not doing that. So sometimes I think you can doubt or create self-doubt, like, did I do the right thing? Have I made the right decision? But I think when you sit down and you think back and you circle back to why you did it in the first place, and that really is where it allows you to come up to for me anyways, the answer of like, yes, this is what I want and this is what I wanted.
That is incredible. So you were launching your own business and you had all this responsibility, making all these sacrifices, and you're doing it all still living at home. That is amazing to me. How did you view yourself? Like, what did you, if you were to describe yourself to somebody else or describe your business, describe what you're doing to somebody else at that time, how would you have described yourself?
Just a very bright young woman who totally had a belief in wanting to be her own boss and wanted to create her own destiny and not relying on somebody else telling me what I could and couldn't do. Right. So, and I didn't want to put any kind of limitations on what I could achieve. And I think if I had started out in the corporate, and not that that's wrong or bad or whatever, because it's different for everyone. But for me personally, I think if I'd gone that route, I think I would have been, I think I would have either been bored or felt suffocated or, because we're talking many years ago when things were still fairly stereotypical. And, being a female in business for yourself, it wasn't the norm. And so I think breaking out of that kind of mold at that time, because we're talking the early 80s, and I know I'm aging myself here, but in the early 80s, it wasn't, people looked at you like, oh, okay. So I think you threaten, and sometimes you threaten the opposite sex, and, from a societal standpoint. So.
Well, it seems like that took a tremendous amount of inner fortitude to be able to do that. So that's an amazing story and very inspiring. When you started that first franchise of yours, you started your own business, what were some of the biggest lessons that you had to learn in order to become successful with that business?
The biggest lesson is that, there's no shame in hard work. And, in franchising, everything is process driven. And so learning to work within a system, a process, without disrupting, what was created. And so those were some of the things that, were new to me. And also the learnings were that the opportunities were huge, right? So it opens doors to other things, right? And I'm a big believer in education and being informed, right? And so being informed allows you to make hopefully the right decisions for yourself. And so I found that, just learning early on, what a franchise is, what a franchisor is. I'm a franchisee. What am I? The legal documents, banking, all those things. So there was a lot of things that you had to learn quickly and sometimes on the run, and also building relationship skills, I think, is huge. So not only for your customers, but also working with a franchisor, right? Because we're always in partnerships, the way I see it. We're in partnerships with our spouses or significant others or whatever. We're in partnerships with our kids, but in the corporate world, you're in partnership with your customers. And in my case, I was in partnership with the franchisor. And so, learning those things early on, I think are lifelong lessons for me anyways.
So you started this business. You're learning all these lessons. You pay back that loan in a year, which is incredible. What did you do then? What happened?
Then, I just stayed the course for a few years, and then I sold. And then I was sort of like, I had no idea what I was going to do at that point, because everything just happened. You talked earlier about, wow, this like went boom, boom, boom. And all of a sudden here I was, and not knowing what the heck I was going to do with my life. So that's kind of where I was at that point.
How did you, okay, so when you said you stayed the course, did you open more locations, or did you stuck with that?
Just one location.
Okay. And then how did you come to the conclusion that you wanted to sell? And then how did you actually go about doing that?
I actually had a partner at the time, and she decided to buy me out. So it made the transition pretty easy.
Wow,
So that happened
very easy.
Pretty quick.
So then you sold the business, your partner bought you out, which is awesome. Then you're like, okay, well, what do I do now? Right? So what did you do at that now?
I went back to school. I thought about becoming a travel agent, but I just didn't want to, just go and work at a travel agency. So I went and took an intensive course for about 6 to 8 months. And then I worked as a corporate travel agent, which it was fun, a lot of learning, but obviously it wasn't for me, but I stuck it out for a few years. And at that point I was married and I was pregnant with my daughter. And so then I decided to not go back to work. So it was fun.
So was that when you met Chuck?
No, Chuck's my second husband.
Okay. So yeah.
He comes later in the story.
So I'm really interested to learn that chronology of up to Chuck, because everybody who's watching, listening, Chuck has been on the show as well. One of
Mhm.
the previous episodes that's published, and I actually think maybe y'all are the first power couple on the show. So it's very exciting. Y'all are making history here. But yeah, so what was the chronology up until Chuck?
Oh, I have to think now. I'm just thinking in years. So then I worked as a travel agent. Then I decided to, stay home with my daughter. And that's when I got involved with actually my second franchise, which was corporate gifting. It was a home-based business. So, it sort of brought out my creative side. And so I had that business for about 12 or 13 years. Um, that was an interesting one because the franchisor actually closed everything down only after a couple of years. There was some legal things going on and whatnot, and not to get into anything detailed. So I ended up actually buying the name and the trademarks from her, and then just continued on with the business, which was a lot of fun. I talked to my daughter, sorry, a lot about, when I developed my website back in the mid 90s. And back then building a website was like $20,000. Now you can do it for a couple of hundred. So, big differences, right? I had to learn HTML or whatever, and I'm not a technical person at all. So that was a great opportunity, and it learned it created a lot of learning lessons for me in that time. And that's kind of where my personal situation changed in between there. And then, just raised my daughter and focused on her in business. And then I sold it. And then that's when I started working corporately for franchisors. So taking my knowledge of the franchise industry and having been a business owner, I was able to then parlay that into a role with a franchisor. So working sort of like I'm going to say director of operations. You're wearing a lot of different hats, and supporting and talking to franchisees, which I really enjoyed because they valued what I had to say, because I kind of walk the walk and talk the talk, and understood what their struggles were, and was able to provide solutions and suggestions for their businesses. And that's kind of where I was in a few various roles until I met Chuck.
So with that corporate gifting franchise,
Mm-hmm.
you started one, then the main office closed down, and then you bought the rights to that and the name
Mm-hmm.
and so on and so forth, and then you relaunched it, or you just kept it going?
I just kept it going. It was a home base. I moved it out of my house into a retail location, and I had warehousing space because it's a cyclical business, and you're doing a lot of it in your Q3, 4. So in order to manage, volumes of thousands of pieces being sent out, you had to put things into place.
So then you were the franchisor at that point.
No, I was the only one running it, so there were no more franchisees left. They all dissolved. There was, I think, maybe one or two that were doing their own thing under a different name, and so I was the only one. Which I could have been a franchisor if I wanted to, but I just decided to just run the business for myself and keep things as simple as possible.
I was about to ask, what was your thought process going through there? Because you'd kind of been on the franchisee side, like, why didn't you go more into the franchisor space?
Just I was a single mom at that point. I had split from my first husband, and my focus was my daughter. So in order to support her and I just wanted to make sure that 100% of my focus was on those two. And I think if I had gone the franchisor route, I don't, I would like to think it would have been successful, but I knew it would have taken a lot of time and resources that I wasn't willing to put in at that point in my life.
So then when you sold that business,
Mm-hmm.
how did you go about finding the buyer and actually executing that sale?
I just worked actually with a commercial realtor that came in and did an assessment on the business, just through P&Ls and things like that. And, I gave him a timeline because in order to prepare for the busy season, I said, I was going to give it 6 months. And if I hadn't sold it, then I would have to run another year and then whatnot. But we actually sold it within 3 months. Just because I think it was a clean business, everything was done. I'm pretty process oriented, and I like to have things in a certain way. So going through the books and the files, everything was very organized and very neat. I had a website. People were ordering globally. We had shipping in place. I had a warehouse. So it was very much turnkey, as you would expect any franchise to be. And so I think that's what made the process very simple for the buyers, where they were able to come in. Everything was very transparent. The books were up to date and all that kind of fun stuff. So it made it pretty.
So we talked about this a little bit, but I really want to understand more of your thought process here. Because if everything was set up, everything was clean, the books were up to date, everything was organized, you had everything in place, why didn't you just hire like a management team and remove yourself from the business? Like, what was the thought process there?
I just wanted to do something different. I'd been doing it for almost 13 years, and I just wanted I wanted a change. And so I wanted to make a clean break from it. Because even though having a manager in place, yes, they're going to run the day-to-day, but it still requires, I believe, a certain amount of time and energy into a business. Even if you want to be a passive owner, you still have to be involved. And so I just decided to make a clean break from it.
And so at that point, then you went into the corporate consulting space and started helping other franchisees and franchisors?
Correct. I was working corporately for franchisors in different spaces, retail, home services. So got involved with a few.
So then from then until now, what has that timeline looked like?
I did open up another franchise after that in 2008. People always say, "You're going to open up another business?" I go, "You never know. Never say never. Nothing's forever." But I opened up a weight loss franchise, Canadian based, in 2008, and sold it 3 years later. So, and I knew nothing of the space, just wanted to be able to get in a business where you could make money, but also help people. And that was the perfect business and the opportunity to do that. So, so I did that and ramped it up fairly successfully. And, interesting, the reason I sold it was there was a gentleman looking to open up his own franchise, and he saw my location and really loved it. And I said, put an offer in, which he did. And well, as they say, the rest is history. So
you've started multiple businesses. You've worked in the corporate side. It seems like you have a ton of experience with franchising. Clearly. What do people need to know about franchising that they're not thinking about?
That's a great question, Ben, because people only know what's kind of thrown out to them on the internet. And I talked to some really, really intelligent people who are just not knowledgeable in the space. And they all think it's only about the brand names, right? Like the McDonald's and Burger Kings and Tim Hortons of the world. And it's so much more than that. Franchising is small business. And I'm sure you've seen the sayings, if you support small business, you're supporting the local owners. And it's true. They just happen to be part of a bigger system. But at the end of the day, they're running their own small business. They have employees, or they might not. They're giving back by paying taxes, and they're hiring people that are, that live locally and things like that. So for me, I talked a little bit about it earlier. To me, if I can educate people just about the opportunity in general and what's out there, then I think I've kind of done my job. So, in the US, there's, over 3,800 franchise brands, and there's probably a lot that most people have never heard of or don't even realize that the local businesses in their community might be franchised. And so it's all about the opportunities that are out there without having to spend a fortune, millions of dollars into a business. So I believe there's something out there for everyone. Is franchising right for everyone? No. And that's kind of where I kind of come in and try to figure that out for people.
So let's say I'm interested in potentially starting a franchise,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm coming to you and I'm like, hey, I don't even know where to start. I don't know if this is the right model for me. What do we do from there?
So it all starts with a conversation. I want to know about you, what your background is, because I believe there are a lot of transferable skills that people can take from personal, corporate, whatever it might be, into a franchise business. And then I take them through an assessment. It's kind of like a business model assessment. And what it does is it kind of highlights your key skills. Okay, so there's no right or wrong. It just kind of highlights, and it kind of positions where people should be in franchising. And what I mean by that is that some franchises are new and emerging, some are well established, and some are sort of in between. Some people, have no desire to invest in something where there's maybe just a few locations, where they want something with, call it 50 to 100 locations. So it's kind of figuring that out. Then I take them through a very thorough consultation, and ask a lot of questions, right? And that's where I figure out, is franchising the right fit for you? And sometimes timing is everything, right? So financially, that's a big piece for me, because that's the gateway to almost doing anything, right? Now, there are ways to find the money through funding sources, family, friends, retirement accounts, parents, whatever. If you really want something, you can figure it out. And if timing's not right, then we talk about it in a year or two. Then once you figure that out, geographically, I want to know where people are. And to me, the big thing is, I like to know your exit strategy, right? People say, well, we're just starting. Why do you want to? I want to know where you want to be in 10 years. Because if you haven't figured that out, it's going to be kind of hard to figure out where our starting point is and what's the path going to be like from the start to the finish. So I find that if I'm able to kind of draw that out of people, I'm able to create a success plan for them. Somebody said to me once, oh, I want to be a millionaire. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, really? I said, we can work on that, and we have to start somewhere. And maybe that means opening up multiple locations or scaling the business at different levels. Maybe it's buying a master franchise. I mean, there's different ways of looking at it. So if that's your end goal, then we've got to start somewhere. And I just need to know you're serious about it. Great. And then we'll kind of, help you along that process. So it's educating people throughout that whole thing. Because I'm a big believer that, always making an informed decision, whether you're saying no or yes. You need to know what you're saying no to, but you should also know what you're saying yes to. And those are the clients that have made the best decisions, in my humble opinion, anyways.
So who would be the ideal franchise, or somebody who is going to start a franchise? Who would be the ideal person for that?
Like my clients, who the ideal client is?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone that has thought about wanting to work for themselves, but not really sure if they should, and what's out there. Like you said to me, like if I come to you, most people have no idea. Sometimes they come with an idea, and 9 times out of 10, we don't even go near that, because it's, what they're reading on the internet, very different to when you're going through due diligence. And even someone, ageism is a big thing that I deal with all the time, and it's very prevalent in the workplace, and it's something that I can't control. And what happens is people that are over the age of 50 and they've been, restructured, outsized, et cetera, 3 or 4 times. And what happens is the time between when they're not working and trying to find a job continues to increase and increase. So what happens is their earning potential decreases and decreases. So my message to them is that, yes, while you're going to be taking money to invest in your business, you're investing it in yourself and building an equity piece that you're able to, down the road resell, or just continue running it, or create a legacy for your kids or something. I've seen it happen where people come to me and say, I went through all my savings in 2 years and I can't afford to start a business now. And, my hands are tied because of that. So, I say there's options for everyone. So I'm looking at a lot of sort of diverse backgrounds of people that are looking to get into, business ownership. And if you thought about it, explore it, because it doesn't cost you anything to explore it.
So let's say somebody wants to start a franchise.
Mm-hmm.
They, or at least they think they do at this point, and they feel like they have some of the operational skills, leadership skills, management skills to pull it off. But they don't have the money. Like, what are those options in order to raise the money or find the money? Or like, how do you, where's the money? Where's the money? How do you find it?
So I tell people, go to your bank. If you've got a good relationship with your bank, you can talk to them about getting a traditional loan. You could look at a home equity loan. There's also a number of funding partners that I work with that deal in the franchising space. So small business loan that will help you to get pre-qualified. So there's a lot of different resources that you can go to, and a lot of resources that people didn't even know existed. So, when you're working with someone who's in the space and, lives and breathes it every day, this is where I'm able to kind of point them in, a few different directions to say, here's maybe 3 sources you should be checking out in order to find it.
So does your path cross with Chuck's in that regard of the private equity side raising money? Because we talked a lot about his work in the private equity space. Does that ever come up?
No, it's kind of different. So the way he, his raising funds is a totally different animal. The funding spaces that I'm in is very different. So yeah, we're both consultants, but sometimes we're polar opposite, the end. He knows nothing about franchising, and I, knows a little bit of what he does, and it's okay. It's okay.
So y'all are both consultants. Y'all are both entrepreneurs. So it seems like y'all must be incredibly busy. How do you make that work?
It's just like anything else. We respect one another's businesses, and we're there to support one another. And if I'm bouncing an idea off of him or vice versa, we're there just to listen and to provide feedback. And but we're busy during the day and sometimes at night, sometimes on weekends, and we just make it work. So that's the beauty of consulting, is that you've got flexibility, and just to be able to work with one another's schedule. It works out fine. And then it's like, everything else in life, the other things that come into play, family and obligations and things like that. So yeah, but it's good. It's good synergy between the two of us, because our businesses are so different.
Because I'm really interested in that, because I'm spending 10 to 15 hours a day working on my business every day, and I really don't take off nights or weekends at all. I just wanted to know, like, how did y'all do it? Because you're both doing a lot of really cool things. So I just wanted to learn more about that, a little bit for my own personal sake. But I also feel like a lot of people probably have that.
Yeah, I think you just need to put boundaries in place. We could all work 18 hours a day, and I've done that, and you burn out. And so there's it's important to make sure there's the you time, right? So things that have nothing to do with your work, whether it's going to the gym or going to the movies or meeting up with friends. I live by my calendar. I really do. And some people are like, oh, And so I try to block, if I need to block off personal time, I literally block it off in my calendar. So this way I know that because sometimes I'm talking and, I'm talking to a client, oh, let's book our next call. And then if I don't have it blocked off, I'm just filling my space. And then it's like, oh, geez, I really need to take that time off to do whatever. And so I think and maybe that's not for everyone. Maybe some people are like, I don't want to live by a calendar or whatever. That's what works for me. And so I literally block off my weekends when I want them blocked off. Sundays to me are sacred. I don't work Sundays. That's family time and my downtime. If I have to work a half day Saturday, I will. But I got stuff to do like everybody else. I got grocery shopping to do and household chores and all that kind of stuff. That's just life. So I think it's important to figure out how to work smart, right, and not work as hard or as long. Some weeks, yeah, you might have to put in the extra time, but I think you need to, for you, Ben, I think you need to find that balance.
Yeah, because it seems like, to me, it doesn't seem like it's work. I mean, it's really, I really, really love it. And I love what I do. And, being able to talk to incredible people like you all the time and Chuck and, all the other guests, like, I love this. Like, this is so much fun for me. And, figuring out just, being able to ask questions of people who have been there and done that, because clearly you've been there and done that. Like, that's so rewarding.
But you need to recharge your batteries too, right? So, I mean, I love what I do as well, but I know that I need to take that break so that I come back better and stronger for my clients. So if I'm recharged, then I'm, ready to work hard for them.
That's true. That's very true.
But that's just my personal opinion. So,
so I feel like one of the foundations of humanity, I'm taking a pretty big turn here, is connection. And I'm really interested to hear your answer to this, because we've talked a lot about processes and systems and organization, but we haven't talked too much about people and working with people. So I'm interested in learning your philosophy on developing deep, meaningful, and genuine connection with another human being.
Well, what do you want to know? How I do it, or how I view it, or
Your philosophy on it.
Yeah, I think it evolves over as you age. I think, anyways, that's how I see it. I think connections are important, especially for myself, who I work in a silo and I don't have that human interaction that most people have on a regular basis. So it's important for me to do the extracurricular things so that I do have that interaction, right? Otherwise, you become too, sort of in your own space. And I think it's important to have people either express opinions or whatever it might be. I also think that connections, depending if you're talking personal or professional, on a personal level, I think the circle becomes smaller as you get older. And that's just because of time constraints, right? As your kids get older, they get married and they have kids and all. So then your focus has to be with them. So then the outer circle of the friends, becomes less and less. And then their lives get also busier and things like that. On the professional level, connections are always important. And I think for me, it's about making the right connections, right? And aligning myself with like-minded individuals who share my vision. Okay. So nobody, at least for myself, I hate the time wasters, right? And not that I don't have time but there should be I don't know how to put this in a nice way. The connections I have with people have to be genuine. Okay. And they have to be able to receive, but also to give. Okay. So what I mean by that is that, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but sometimes people will come into your circle and all they want to do is suck everything out of you, but there's nothing reciprocal. And I'm very giving of my time and experience and sharing, and because I'm a big believer that sharing is caring. But over time, when somebody just continually takes and takes and takes and takes, then it's like, okay, that's it, right? So it's trying to find those connections, and sometimes you have to learn more, right? And I think there's something to be said about the wisdom that you gain as you get older, and maybe I didn't really see it much when I was younger or whatever. I don't know where this becomes learned or whatever. So, but to me at this point in my life, that's what's important to me when it comes to connections. And I love meeting people from all backgrounds in life, and people that have been super successful, that are so super down to earth, because that empowers me to think, wow, this is somebody that has just done so amazing well. And then you talk to them and you feel that you're at their kitchen table having a cup of coffee, because that's how comfortable they make you feel. And that's what I love about it. So I probably rambled on, but
No, I love going into the detail because, like I said earlier, it, maybe to you, you're used to knowing what you think, but but I don't know what you think all the time. So I want to know these things.
yeah.
So, question for you.
Uh-huh.
Big surprise there. I have another question. What is your greatest theory?
Oh, my greatest theory?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's a great question. I probably have to think about that.
What's
What
the
is
first
yours?
thing?
Well, what's yours?
My greatest theory. I don't know what my greatest one is yet, because I'm only 24, so I, I feel like I will have other ones in my lifetime, so I can't prejudge if this is my greatest theory or not. But I do believe wholeheartedly that the purpose of life is to embark on a journey of continuous self-discovery. And the purpose of that self-discovery is to understand at a fundamental level and get more in touch with and become more whole with who you are at your core, and to be the youest you that you've ever been. And I feel like there are many different layers to each person. I think about my own experiences. There's a part of me that is me at my core. There's a part of me that are external factors or external influences that I have taken in and now confuse as part of my core. And I don't know how to tell the difference all the time. And so I think it's a constant journey of working through those layers and understanding who I really am and what I really care about, while also moving forward and having more influences. So I think it's a constant journey. And then all of those impact each other in many different ways that I don't understand at 100%. So that is my theory, is that we're all here to discover more about ourselves and to get really in touch with who we are, and to express that as completely and wholly as we possibly can.
Wow, that's pretty profound for a 24-year-old.
Thank you. But I'm interested in hearing yours. I want to know what your theory is.
I probably have a few, but one that I've often shared is that I believe that people need to reinvent themselves every 3 to 5 years. And, and the reinventing doesn't have to be always, extreme. And if I look back at my life, I can see where I've reinvented myself professionally over the course of my career. And I do believe that people need to do that, just so that, you talked about, that continuous journey. And I think that's what helps you in as part of that journey.
Why every 3 to 5 years? Why that time frame?
Somebody shared it with me years ago, and the same thing at the time, and I can't remember why, but it was just something about, how we evolve as individuals, right? Because as you get older and you learn things and you become more self-aware, then that time of when you reinvent yourself. Now, it could be that you could be at the same company for, let's say, 20 years, but let's say, instead of, being in that same role over and over and over again, you might reinvent yourself by taking on a different position, or going back to school in order to, become the president of the company or whatever it might be. Or in my case, I reinvented myself through different businesses. And I also reinvented myself by working with different corporate people. And so that's how I reinvented myself. And so I do believe that. So for me, that theory holds true, because when I've shared that and expressed it with, some other women, it almost was like I gave them permission that it was okay to do it. And you don't need permission as long as you have given yourself the A-OK, then you should be able to do that. And so that just, becomes part of the belief. So that's probably one of my biggest theories that I often think about.
That's awesome. I love that theory. And I feel like that can be applied to almost any specific situation. If you think about somebody who has been in the same business for 30 years, I'm sure their identity within that business has evolved over time. And so that can fit perfectly into there. I mean, you may not want to start a new business every 3 to 5 years. You may just want to stick on one business. That doesn't mean you have to stay stagnant there. And I think that 3 to 5 years, like, okay, go go ask yourself those hard questions, go relearn about yourself and understand. I think, and learn more about other things. I think that's profound. I do.
Yeah. And I was just talking with a woman a few months ago. She just reached out to me from LinkedIn and liked my background, and we were just chatting, and I asked her, she started this business and she has a really strong marketing background, and it's in the senior care space, which is, I think, a great space. And I said to her, why don't you franchise your business? And she's like, that's what I was thinking about. She said, I've been doing this for about 3 or 4 years, but I'm so scared. And I'm like, it is scary. And anyways, long story short, I put her in touch with someone, and, fingers crossed, she's going to end up franchising her business, because I like her story, and I like what she's done in her community. And I think if she was able to replicate that, across the country, I think it would be impactful in so many different ways. And so, and I said that to her. I said, you're reinventing yourself. And I said, I'm a big believer in this, reinventing every 3 to 5 years. And she was like, oh my God, yeah. Like, she worked corporately, and she did this out of a sort of a passion and hobby play. And it just, it blossomed into a business. So I was pretty happy for her.
Is there anything about yourself that you think is an important part of who you are that we did not talk about today? In other words, what did I miss?
Well, it depends who you talk to, because if you talk to Chuck, he'll be like stubborn, headstrong. So, which is probably right. And I'm, a bit of a control freak, and, there's probably reasons why I am that way. So, again, being self-aware and making sure that it doesn't, impact negatively on the people around you. So, but I'm pretty much an open book. What you see is what you get. I try to be as transparent as possible.
So we talked about me being 24 a little while ago, and the reason I bring that up again is because it's relevant to the question that I want to ask you. But what question should I be asking you, or multiple questions? Specifically me, asking specifically you, with your knowledge, your wisdom, your experience, that I just wouldn't think to ask?
In terms of what you're like, with what you're doing in your work,
in life, and yeah, however you think I should be asking that.
Well, it's, think about your, like what I talk to my clients about, what is your end game? Think about why you got involved with what you're doing. There's obviously a reason, which maybe you can share with me, and how this, because things evolve, right? And you end up where you are today for a reason. And sometimes people think about it and they go, well, yeah, because all these different pieces fell into place. And think about what that path might look like for you, and what are you hoping to achieve? Because sometimes people just jump in and they don't think about long term. And I think that if you said to me, well, I want to create this, multi-billion-dollar company that's doing X, Y, and Z, I'd be like, that's great. Like, go for it. Like, set the bar high for your dreams, and it's going to be a hard road, but it's going to be well worth it. But I want to know kind of what that is and the whys, right?
Well, Marissa, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing this time with me. It's been very special, and I really do feel honored to have been able to speak with you. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ben. It's been a lot of fun. I don't always have time to share about what I'm doing and whatnot. So, it's if I can make a difference for one person, then I've done my job. I think your program is great, and I look forward to future broadcasts that you'll be having as well.
Thank you very much, and to everybody who's watching, listening. I want to say thank you. Thanks for sticking with us all the way till the end. I know how valuable your time is, and I appreciate you sharing it with us. And I love y'all very much. I do. So thank you so much. And I will see y'all on the next episode.